I saw the first goal live, but when I was caught up with the highlights of the second goal, I thought he had a bad day because
Mm.
both of those I felt he could come for. Both of them were in and around the 6 yard um, box. The first one he came forward for and then stepped back,
Yeah, yeah.
where he needs to just come forward and claim it and be a presence in that area, and take the initiative, which he didn't do. The second one again, he kind of ventured forward and then stepped back. The ball is up in the air for a corner. He needs to come and wipe people out, wipe your defenders out, wipe the forwards out,
Mm.
everything. Get rid of everything, clear out everything, and be commanding in his area.
Yeah,
And that's
indeed.
not something he's good at.
No. It's interesting because I was listening to Five Live on Sunday, and they had Rob Green and Tom Heaton on, who are both very articulate pundits and both know their craft. And people were throwing in questions about some of the top goalkeepers. And one theory posited by Heaton about Hugo was that he's a line goalkeeper. He called him a line keeper. He likes to save from his line. Some keepers like to be 3 or 4 yards out and narrowing angles and what have you. And he also said that when he first came to Spurs, he was constantly getting caught out, thinking he had time, particularly with his using the ball with his feet, and got done several times by quick forwards who were pressing him. And so we've seen him kicking a bit longer now, but I think that's I don't know whether this is a Poch versus Jose thing, because Poch liked to play out and Jose's saying don't worry about playing out. Andy, would you be thinking in the summer that we need to move our keeper on, because there are lots of good keepers out there, and maybe Hugo has run his course for us? What do you think?
Well, it's quite interesting. I was looking at who scored earlier this week, and or last week, and I was comparing Loris to Allison and Edison, and his stats actually stack up better than theirs for last season. Strangely, this season obviously he's had his injury and he's had his little moments where he's caused a few issues. So I don't know how he totally stacks up, but I get the feeling with Loris, he's still a top keeper, but he is on the decline a bit.
Yes,
and I wouldn't be surprised if Mourinho is thinking about changing him.
Yeah, I think Mourinho, we know, can be, if he needs to be, he can be pretty, ruthless. And I wonder whether that might, because goalkeeper is such a vital position, and if you feel that perhaps the confidence in the keeper isn't quite there, it can shake the whole team. And that might be something we'll see.
Brian, I'm a big fan of Gazanigas, personally. I mean, that is a very safe pair of hands, in my opinion. And that spell that he had when Lloris was out injured, I felt that he was a safer keeper and a more consistent keeper than Lloris. He's nodding his head furiously in disagreement.
Shaking my head, yeah, I'm shaking my head. I can't agree with that. I think, despite the mistakes that we saw with Lloris yesterday, I still feel that in terms of the presence that he gives to the defence, they find him a more calming presence. He came in and he's been assured up until yesterday, and he's saved penalties as well as Gazaniga saved penalties, I understand, so that there's an argument for both. He's more experienced, is a calming presence, and he seems to stabilise the defence, even if he is prone to the odd error here and there. So,
you're weighing up communication skills and leadership skills versus shot stopping skills, I think, and fair enough. Lloris is a more calming influence. He's a better leader, but as a keeper, I don't think there's much to choose between the two of them.
I think Loris is a much better shot stopper, much better. He's more agile than Gazaniga. I think Gazaniga's got a much better distribution than Loris, although Loris's kicking stats are actually really good. So I just think he looks a bit awkward sometimes.
Well, look, let's move away from what was a kind of a bit of an in and out performance at the weekend. We'll worry about the next two games in a second. Let's, Brian, I know you had some thoughts. Lots of people on Twitter bemoaning the fact that it's looking possible, at least, that Pochettino will pitch up at Man United, given their travails with Ollie, who's not quite doing the business. And it seems to me that they are going to be looking for a manager with a bit more heft and a bit more gravitas than him. But lots of people on Twitter moaning about this, and we can't be having Poch turning up anywhere else, as if the guy shouldn't be working anywhere near us. What's your take on this?
Well, my take on it is that it's a great big merry-go-round of all the top managers going to all the top teams, and every few years they all change places.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm beginning to feel that they've been, as a group, this kind of upper echelon of elite managers are making mugs of all of us, really, because each time they move, they get more money than they got before. I'm starting to feel a little bit put upon by the fact that, for example, at the end of the season, Guardiola might leave City because of the Champions League issue. Meanwhile, if Spurs haven't won a trophy, Mourinho might think about moving on, in which case Guardiola could end up at Spurs in a year's time, and round we go again. Mm-hmm. It just annoys me, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. But Guardiola saying today that whatever happens to City, he's staying. Steve, you wanted to make a comment on.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting take from Brian there. I mean, you want the top managers going to the top clubs. It's simple as that. You wouldn't want, if Mourinho goes, we're not really saying that we'd prefer someone that has no experience potentially. We're now at that point where we're saying that we want to attract the top managers. We've achieved and we've got to a level that we feel that we're supposed to be being able to be an attractive proposition for the top managers, as with all the top clubs. So why would we not expect the top managers to go to the top clubs? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Are you expecting Allardyce, for example, to turn up at Spurs, or Pulis to be the next contender for Man City, or someone, Nathan Jones from Luton to be like in the running for Man City? I mean, I'm not really sure the point. I understand, you expect Poch to be in the contention for both of Man United and Man City because they're big clubs, top clubs, and he's proved himself to be someone that's at the top of his game. So why would he not expect him to be into contention? It doesn't make sense to me.
But if all the top managers constantly get all the top jobs, then the other managers coming through are never going to get enough experience to become top managers. I know it's a different subject, but have you watched BBC drama recently? The same 10 actors play the lead roles in every single BBC drama. It's because the producers of those shows have not got the imagination to look beyond that handful of popular, talented players. And the manager thing, to me, feels exactly like that.
But isn't that, Brian, isn't that a case of, you've got so much at stake for these big clubs, and, I sometimes think to myself, there was a lot of talk about maybe Spurs would go for somebody like, Potter, or I've forgotten the name of the guy at Bournemouth for the minute.
Eddie Howe.
Eddie Howe. And you're thinking, we know that these are proven managers at small clubs, but there's a world of difference between, that kind of, shoestring management and coming to a club like Spurs or to, Man United, Man City, Liverpool, where the scale of everything and the stakes are so much higher. And I can kind of understand why chairmen take what appear to be safe decisions. But let's be honest, we lost Pochettino. We know that that Mourinho was clearly in our sights long before Levy let him go. But if Levy had let him go and had said, as Steve said, what if he said, well, we're going for Eddie Howe? I think a lot of people at Spurs would have been saying, well, we're not thinking big then. We're not thinking like a big club. We're thinking like a club that's, put itself in the somewhere between 5th and 9th, and we're not pitching ourselves at Real Madrid, Liverpool, Man City. It's I kind of understand that reluctance, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, when we went with Poch, we weren't a big club, and we couldn't attract Guardiola, Mourinho, and So what you're saying, Brian, makes perfect sense, right? You know, you get a manager for the status that you are, and it's up to that manager to prove himself. The opportunity. So
we lost everything.
Poch worked with us, and Poch worked with us to take us to a higher level. So now deserves the opportunity to go higher. So then someone else would need to say, for example, Ancelotti's gone into Everton because they've got a lot of money, but maybe that should have been an opportunity for someone like Eddie Howe or Graham Potter to then prove that he could do it at Everton, and then give himself an opportunity to be then regarded as a top manager to then go into the top roles. So pitch yourself at one of these teams that are just in and around. That Chris Wilder's building an amazing reputation for himself at the moment. So then his next role will now be at a bigger club, and then he'll become someone that is moving in those circles. But don't expect, I wouldn't expect someone just to go from a club that's struggling in the Premier League to managing a top team. It doesn't make sense.
I think it's a fair point, and you very rarely see. I mean, you could argue Chelsea have taken a bit of a risk with Lampard because he doesn't have a great deal of managerial pedigree. But on the other hand, he knows that club backwards and was managed by great managers throughout his career at Chelsea, and therefore it's probably less of a risk. And I think perhaps Chelsea not quite seeing themselves at the moment anyway as serious contenders for to win the league. Let's move on from there a little bit. Andy, this week we had some news about season ticket prices going up by, was it 1.4%? Is that right?
Yeah, apparently so. 1.41.
Yeah, and a fair deal of agitation about that among at least some of the fans. What was your feeling about that?
Well, some people want to
Andy, could you start again? Because you just cut out momentarily, and I'm sure we've missed some gold there. We missed some gold. So let's do that bit again.
I'm sure you didn't, but anyway. No, I just think obviously going to football is very expensive for some people. It is for most people, and an increase is probably too much for some people to bear. But in my mind, 1.5% is in line with inflation, and that's probably why it's gone up by that much. And they are going to freeze it for 2 years. So is it that bad? I don't know. It's probably quite debatable.
Yeah.
I think it's an expensive thing going to football. Whether it's at West Ham or any Premier League club, it's probably as expensive as all of them.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the argument is that we start from a high base, and therefore any increase kind of exacerbates that sense of agitation. That here's a club that is coining it and relying on fans' continued loyalty to make sure they fill the stadium every week at whatever cost. Brian, I mean, you're not a season ticket holder. But you're...
Don't tell everyone.
I'm sorry about that.
I used to be for a very long time.
But you're a fairly regular visitor to the lane. In terms of getting hold of tickets now, you're finding that it's... I don't know, have you got a source or whatever, but are you having to pay through the nose?
I'm a One Hotspur member, which means that...
Okay.
And as a premium One Hotspur member, you're guaranteed a ticket for most games.
Yeah.
But, to me, it's the difference in price between... I mean, for example, they were offering tickets for the FA Cup game this afternoon. £25 wherever you are in the ground, virtually. The difference in price between that and the Premier League or the Champions League, I think that's too huge a gap now. I think that the FA Cup shouldn't be a kind of knockdown bargain basement match. And the prices for that are probably too low, and the prices for the other games are too high.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get any lower.
Yeah.
Because now that we're bringing in the big managers, Mourinho's getting paid twice what Pochettino was getting paid. All of this is just going to push the prices up and up and up and up.
Yep.
And I can't see where it's going to